Well,
I think I need help. And this is where I'm going to ask you if you could give an example, it could be hypothetical or real,
yeah,
of this type of experience and also the detoxifying, right?
yeah.
Which is
How
sort
do
of
you
like the
detoxify? Right.
the like gentrifying your inner language so that you don't sound like a complete asshole.
Right, right. So totally. And I think, I mean, the short answer is you got to ask some stuff as a question often to
Yeah.
stop yourself from making a big judgment. But Tim, yeah, I think what I pick up in you and from listening to you is you're willing to take some risks, right? And so I
Hmm.
think this is really about risk taking and saying something that you're not sure you should say, but you're going to put it out there. And then the question is, how do you do it with as much finesse as possible so that you don't end up having blowback, which,
Hmm.
I've had, believe me, I've sometimes said the thing I think I cannot say and had people look at me like, oh my goodness, but most of the time I'm reading the room right. Here's an example which is, I mean, just classic, more of a business example, but it certainly happens in my personal life too. So we went through various business planning types of tactics at Stripe, but one of them we were using for a while was your classic quarterly business review, right? You have teams come in, we've given them a template, and we say, please fill out these things. Let's see your data. Let's see where you are versus your goals. What's your strategy? What's your plan? Write this memo. We're all going to read the memo and then we're going to have this discussion about how you're doing and like, do you, and often teams come in and they want more resources or they want us to solve something or decide something. And we're of course saying like, well, it's actually you're supposed to be deciding and solving, but it's a discussion with the executive team. And I'm sitting in one of these reviews with a team that's primarily working on an area of the product. So it's product and engineering leaders. It's not my part of the org that I run, but I'm invited to be there and I like to be there. I like to be close to the product. And I'm listening to the discussion, and it starts to become incredibly clear to me that the team is feeling defensive or blocked or angry. I couldn't quite tell what it was, that there's another team doing some similar work. And by the way, if you've read any Jack Welch stuff, he actually had this tactic as a leader where he'd put two teams on the same problem and sort of like get them to compete. These tiger teams, that was not Stripe's tactic. I just want to be clear. We were not interested. We never had enough people. There's no way we would put engineers on the same like believe me. And so it was mystifying. I'm like, how is this? And I think by the way, I could hear it because I wasn't in the room super close to the material, right? This wasn't my part of the org. I hadn't heard about the details of some of these projects until this meeting. I'm reading the document, I'm listening to them talk, and I said, can I just ask if there's something we're not talking about here? And they're all looking at me because I rarely poke in on certain moments with respect to like, what's our product roadmap and what are we, and is there something we're not talking about? And everyone looks at me and I said, I feel like you're really concerned about this other team and what they're building or what they're up to. Are you concerned? And initially, no, no, no. I mean, it's fine. It's fine. Like they've got this thing they're doing that, I said, well, is it, do you think it's the same thing? Is that what I'm hearing? And I just started to ask a bunch of questions of the leader of the discussion. And I said, well, should that team be in the room right now? Like, should we have a meeting with both of you? Because feels like there's asymmetrical information and that you all don't feel confident in what they're building and that you're either dependent on them or competing with them with what you're building. And they were like, maybe. No, I mean, it eventually became like, we don't have the right people in the room to have a conversation about the problem.
Hmm.
And so we sort of stopped it and said, let's go do that, to the credit of the rest of the people in the room. But as we left, one of the engineers who was sitting on the sort of periphery walked up to me on the stairs and he was like, that was refreshing.
Hmm.
But why I'm bringing it up is, to me, that was a moment of leadership, which, by the way, you don't have to be a VP or a COO to do that. Like the leadership is to say, I am observing a thing that people are clearly not saying and are uncomfortable and is actually, seems to me like a bad practice happening. And I am going to just call it. Like, I'm going to ask, is this going on? Am I seeing this correctly? And it's going to change the whole trajectory of the meeting and the conversation and maybe of the team and their work.
Hmm.
And there may be, I mean, it did result in some deduping ultimately, but I think that's what I mean by say the thing.
Deduping meaning having people working on less similar
Yeah,
overlapping Venn
right.
diagrams of responsibilities.
Exactly. And I think really what it was is they they both had a part of their team that was sort of doing the same thing, and they were feeling dependent on each other because it was almost like a yin yang, and they like didn't have the whole picture. And I was like, all right, someone needs to have the whole thing under their control because
Hmm.
it didn't feel so. It was almost duplicate plus dependency, which is sort of worse.
Sounds like a recipe for
Yeah,
lots of
exactly,
lots of headache.
exactly. But there's also, Tim, I'm sure you can picture an example in a personal situation where,
Oh, they're all
where
the
you take a
time,
risk, with a
all the time.
friend and you say, "Hey, have you told your husband that you feel that way?"
Hmm.
So the detoxifying, though, in any of these examples is in your mind, you're having a judgment. Like we're always judging. The brain looks for shortcuts, right? We know this. It's like I'm judging and I'm like, oh, I'm convinced that they're pissed at this other team, or I'm convinced that there's or I'm convinced my friend and her husband are having problems and I'm going to solve them. And, but like you can't come out to detoxify it. You have to sort of float above yourself and say, it is not going to be productive for me to open my mouth and issue a judgment on another person or someone else's work product.
Yeah, people take that really well.
Yeah, exactly. People super don't like that. So, what can I say? And my feeling is it's usually a question that opens the aperture of the conversation, but keeps them in a mode of curiosity, openness. Like, how can I ask? And the problem and the art here, and this is why you have to practice it, and it's uncomfortable, is sometimes you say something too general, right? You're like, is there something you're not telling me? Right?
Hmm.
That's not going to work because that's going to make them think, wait a minute, is there some like paranoid thing? And like they don't. So it has to be more like, I'm hearing a concern. And you can use the words, I'm hearing a concern about the work of this other team. Say more. Are you concerned?
Hmm.
Validate me. And I'm all about hypotheses. I love like management by hypothesis, which is like, I think this is happening. I'm going to name it. I'm going to name the hypothesis I have. And then I want you to validate it. Or, by the way, fight with me. Say to me, no, 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 I have data to the contrary. And I'm happy to revise my hypothesis. But if you don't state it, you're not going to get anywhere.